Hello, everyone, and we are live yet again. I apologize, I had a little glitch just a moment ago, but I am here for the live and my author's chat of the week. I think my co-host is already on, so I'm running a little behind early. Hello,
Hi,
how are
how are
you?
you?
I'm glad it worked out. See, it wasn't that hard.
Oh, no, it's not like I was stressed about it all day or anything.
It's okay. I have had some times where I have had issues trying to connect with people, and I always feel bad about that. So I always try to make sure I communicate as much as possible prior to the live so it goes as smoothly as possible. But
I'm
welcome.
really glad. Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, how I usually do this is I'll let you introduce yourself and what you write, and if you have your own spiel, go do whatever and say whatever you like, and then I'll do the same, and then from there we'll just chat.
Okay, sounds good. So I should just launch right in.
Go for it.
Okay, all right, here I go. Ready for this? I
I'm ready.
am a um, YA fantasy author. I am not published yet, other than, short stories, poetry, and magazines. That doesn't really count. So I'm working on my debut novel, which is YA fantasy, and I already said that. Um,
You got this. This is practice.
Look
This is
at
good
me. I have
practice.
paper because my brain, I do not trust my brain, so I put it on
Hey,
paper
go for it.
for this moment. So the super fast pitch for my book is titled To Bind Fire, and it tackles the question, why is there pain in the world, and follows a teenage girl's journey from brokenness to heroism in a fantasy world filled with dragons, fantastical creatures, court intrigue, powerful relics, and more. The books include the tropes enemies to lovers, slow burn romance, found family, good versus evil, the secret heir, and evil overlord, just to name a few. So
I was
that's my
gonna say,
super fast pitch.
hey, I like that, and you pretty much hit like all the highlights of what everybody, what everybody's after in a fantasy. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I wasn't paying attention to markets when I wrote it, so it's
Hey,
pretty cool. Pretty cool that it
that's
came out
good.
of me that way.
That's good. That means you have that inner sense of what people like. Now, do you read a lot of YA fantasy? Is that why you chose YA?
Yes. So as a teenager, I was a Trekkie, so I
Oh
was
yeah.
all sci-fi, and then um, they kind of stopped putting sci-fi out there, and I was like, okay, what's like sci-fi that
Hmm.
still has those otherworldly vibes? And fantasy was there for me, and fantasy was really coming out by the time I was in my 20s and getting really popular. And so I started reading that. I started with Sarah J. Maas and Holly Black, stuff like that. I was sucked in immediately. I was like, where has this been my whole life?
Perfect. I love that. Well, if anybody doesn't know me, my name is Katharine Wibell. I'm also a fantasy author. I write epic fantasy and have three series currently. They range from different ages. So I do have my YA, and I'll start off with that because that's what we'll probably be talking most about. But my YA fantasy series is called the Jed Chronicles. I have two books out right now, and I'm about to release or launch a Kickstarter campaign for the third one, my first time doing this, and that will kick launch in a couple weeks. So I'm really been rushing. That's what I've been doing for the last few days solidly, was prepping everything and make sure all the little uh, T's are slashed and I's are dotted and all that kind of fun stuff. But that is a adventure portal fantasy where you have 12 magical worlds, and it's a full multiverse of all different kind of beast beings and the like, pulled from lore worldwide because I love mythology. My other two series kind of get a little older and um, just because they are grittier and they get a little darker. So my debut series was the Incarn Saga. It's 4 books. It's a shifter war fantasy, and my only complete series at the moment. And that's for, like I said, new adult era. And then going even darker still is my, which you can almost never see in these videos because the lighting I can never figure out, but is my adult fantasy. It's about Vikings, and it's a kind of a dark retelling of Norse mythology. So I have 8 of them out right now. They are novellas, and there should be probably close to 16 in all when I am finished with them, We shall see. But that's where I am with my writing, and I've been publishing since 2016. So I've been kind of playing around and figuring as I go since that point in time. Most of it's been stumbling along, and that's why I love doing these because I don't want anybody to take as long as it took me to kind of figure out the basics of publishing. But it's hard. It's hard, especially when you're going
Yeah.
indie. Now, are you going to be an indie? Are you going through a
hmm
publishing house, or how are you approaching
Mm-mm.
publishing?
I decided to go indie because I kept hearing so many unpleasant horror stories about bad
Mhm.
experiences people were having and, with publishing houses. And apparently, unless you get the big ones,
Yeah.
you're not necessarily going to experience the financial success or success in general. And I decided I would rather just kind of rely on myself to do the marketing, even though it's a lot of work. And
It's good.
I succeed or fail on myself.
Hey, I like that. No, I am definitely one of those kind of internally motivated people, and so for that it works for me because I I feel like the best person to do the job to do justice to your own work is almost the author because they know exactly how they want to represent their work, exactly how who they want to pitch and reach to. But I mean, sometimes it's also nice to have help. So I would take help too. I'm not one of those people who are like, no, no, no. I will always take help. I see a comment pop up saying, what do you think about Chat GPT and the creative writing? Have you ever played with it? No, I do not know actually probably anything about that. So that's new to me. So I'll be curious if you explain to me that further. Do you know anything about that?
Sorry.
Okay. I was going to say that one's new to me, but hey, that's why I do this. I always learn something every one of live, and this may be my thing I learn. But with that said, going back to your work, so what inspired you to create this particular story, your debut book?
So it's kind of a gritty story,
Okay.
but it has to do with personal trauma, actually. And I probably won't get too deep into that because, you never know what's going to trigger somebody or upset somebody. But I went through some very hard stuff. I almost lost my life. My daughter almost lost her life in the womb. And it made me want to understand how it is that such bad things can happen in life and then you can just go on living
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
just like you're still here but you went through this thing and it was really hard for me to process it and I just started writing and I wrote directionlessly at first and as it formed into a story and as my characters went through stuff and then triumphed I was healing inside. And by the time I got to the end of the story, I had reached a place of healing where I was able to live again. And my characters had too. And unfortunately, when you wing it like that, it does end up a little scrambled and a little messy. So editing has been a lot of work. Like, there's a story in here somewhere. I know there's a story in here somewhere. But I've let some of my friends who've also been through stuff read it, and they have come to me. Just one gal in particular, just she was sobbing, and she was saying, "Thank you for writing this, and don't you dare change one thing," because it spoke to her the way it spoke to me, and
Mm-hmm.
that was encouraging. That others will see what I did, and others will feel what I felt. It's not just for me; it's for others too.
Well, and I think that's one of the most fantastic things about writing in general, and as for our genre, fantasy, is that you can write about the fantastical and still have real things embedded in it to the point that it will get people emotional, be it what happens to a certain character and their, in the book itself or their backstory. There's all these kind of relatabilities and parallels in works of fiction that I think is one of the reasons why people are drawn to it because it is fantasy and it is escapism to extent, but there is the reality aspects of it too. So I
hmm
think that's fantastic. And writing's a great way. It's one of those most therapeutic ways to kind of just deal with life, even if it's just journaling. So that is really neat that you turned your experiences and your kind of emotions into a work of art because I think all books are works of art. But then I'm
hmm
biased.
No, you're 100% right. I'm not biased at all.
So, okay, so let me ask some of the basics for you since your book's coming up in this next year, I'm assuming.
Yep, yep. October
Okay.
26th is the release date.
Woo!
Yeah.
It's gonna get here real fast. I
Oh my
promise.
goodness. It feels like it's forever away, but then I look at how much I have to do before then. Oh, okay.
Yes, is one of those huge long processes, and if you've never gone to that point of writing a story or a book, it is probably the longest section. It's the editing process, not the writing of it, the actual going back and forth of it. But okay, so let me ask you because you said you are young adult fantasy. I don't know if you know or have terms for any subgenres under that because that's still fairly a larger category.
Hmm.
But are you going to write or have you written in a story where there's one point of view or multiple point of views? Because I think that's one of
Ah.
the big things in fantasy. And I'm reading a book right now that has lots of different points of views, but I always write with just one. As
Hmm.
up until this date, that's the way I've written.
Okay. Yep, there are quite a few points of view. There are two main ones, and I veer into other characters' heads now and
Yeah.
again, a chapter here, a chapter there. Um, and I've definitely heard that you're not supposed to do that, but I'm in love with the scenes I wrote. So,
Uh-huh.
and since I'm self-publishing, I can do whatever I want. So I'm
You
probably going to
can.
keep them. A publisher would probably not go for it. And I have a prologue. Publishers don't like that either, apparently, but there's a
Yeah, I
prologue in
always.
there.
Yeah, I love prologues. So.
And it's not an info dumpy prologue. It's the opposite. It's like you read the prologue and you're probably going to be really confused.
I actually really like those because I like where, yes, it will relate to the story later on, but you might not know what the heck is going on after you
Hmm.
read that snippet. Again, it's
It's
a teaser,
pure
and
raw emotion. That's all. It's just you are feeling what the character's feeling. You don't know why they're feeling it. It's just raining emotions on you. That's what the prologue is.
fantastic. Now,
So
do you
the
do an
opposite of
epilogue?
info dump. Huh?
Are you going to do an epilogue on
I
the back
did.
end? Yeah,
I did. Yep.
they're bookends.
And I'm probably I if my formatter will let me, I'm going to put the prologue for book two at the end of book one for a spoiler because book one ends on a little bit of a sad note. Book two ends awesome. So I kind of want to give my readers encouragement that there is a happy ending. Just please bear with me. So,
Well, I for all my full lengths, I do that because all my full length books, I write the prologues, but I also do the epilogues and the prologue of the next book, which I always forget to when I'm starting the editing process and getting to the formatting, and I'm like, oh, I haven't edited the prologue for the next one, which needs to go in now, and I'm always in a scramble for that, which just reminded me I need to do that too. I think one of my formatters is logged on, so she reminded me later that I need to do that for book four for the one. Okay, anywho, back to where we are. But okay, so multiple points of view, that's pretty cool. And I mean, I think the rule of thumb for people when they jump in different points of view, you can do it even multiple times within a chapter if you have some kind of divide where people understand, but is to either keep it all third person or all first person, not switch within the story. Those, if you know those
mm,
terms. So I think
hmm,
that's more the general
yeah,
term or
yep.
terminology is there are more and more books with multiple points of views or huge casts of points of views. But as long as you just keep it straight, first, second, or third, all these terms, ready to get confused. If anybody is confused at this moment, it's okay.
Yes,
But yeah, no,
I learned what the points of view meant last spring. I have some dear friends who sat me down and said, "Okay, we need to talk. This is first person, this is third person. You pick one."
you can even if you're super gutsy do a second person point of view. I've never read a book like that. I know they exist, but
Mm-mm.
there are very few. And if anybody has a recommendation of a second point of view, I'm curious. But I am not going to dabble with that one at the moment. I stick with third person. That's my
Yeah, I
comfort
write in
zone.
third person. Yep,
That is
and
my
I would be willing to write in first person. I don't think I will ever try second person. I know somebody who says they read a book that was in second person, and they said it was a very unpleasant experience. It was very weird and like other like just
Hmm.
yeah, just very strange. So yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah. You have to write what you're comfortable with, and like, I mean, in the end, you want to like the work you create. So, write within your comfort zone. Don't feel pressured to do something different. Now, if you want to dabble something different, that's again, your choice. And down the line, like you were mentioning, I mean, I wouldn't mind branching off and either challenging myself to write in a first person or do I have a story in my head that would have three different points of view, but I'm just so comfortable with one.
Mm,
It's just, and I'm so used to it too at this point where I'm like, it'll be a challenge to force me out of that,
hmm.
mindset. But yeah, so
I'm always in all of my characters' heads, and I'm always like, oh, but this would have been so cool from this character's perspective. Like,
hmm.
and wanting to head jump, which of course you can't really do that too much because your reader will be very confused because you know what's going on, but your reader doesn't necessarily know what's going on.
Now I
So,
could be wrong, and someone in the industry could be like, nope, absolutely not. But I feel like, to my detriment, I feel like books that, or series especially, that approach from multiple points of view are better received to become adaptations for, especially like TV series, because that's what people like, is
mhm.
always seeing, you cut from one character to another character elsewhere. And so having a book story already set in that way is already kind of geared a little better for that versus following one character along that may be a little better for like a movie. Who knows? You could do that multiple characters and places and movies too, but I don't know. I feel like if my books ever became series, which would be fantastic, waiting for a bid. Okay, fantastic. Um, I would have to figure out if I need to branch, how they would approach it if it became a series, because again, following just one character around might not. I don't know. Would people want to watch that? I think the story's cool, but I just don't know in a TV series if that's what people want to watch. Who watches
I
a lot
think
of
that you're
fantasy that
right. I
follows
think
one character?
most
Sorry, what? Oh, go.
a lot of TV series do. Yeah, they cut to many different, they'll
Mm-hmm.
cut to the villain and they'll cut to all these different, and I do
Mm-hmm.
that in my book. Maybe that's where I learned to write from watching stuff, actually, probably. Because I
Maybe.
love head hopping. I love it.
I like to know what my other characters are thinking, but I don't know, just one character. That's, I don't know. I
Hmm.
have no reason. That's what I do. But you were mentioning you were going to have at least one sequel. Is this going to be a long series or is a
Yeah.
duology or
This is
okay?
going to be a 5 book series. Each book is right around 95K words, which is quite a lot. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's not over that 100 mark, but it's quite a lot. So it is. I'm being pretty ambitious with this one. But I've already got book 2 over 50% drafted and a thorough outline for the rest. So it's just gonna, once I'm finally done editing book 1, it's all going to fall into place for book 2. I want to be writing book 2 right now, but I need to be finishing book 1. I need to discipline myself.
Yeah, and it all depends on each writer how much time you have to sit us down and write. Some people have all day, other people's only have an hour a day. And when you only
Mm-hmm.
have like an hour a day, or if that, um, it is probably better. Again, someone can correct me or have a different opinion, to focus on one project at a time versus someone who has like multiple hours and can like say, okay, 2 hours are spent on this one and 1 hour spent on this project and what 1 hour spent on marketing. Who knows? But yeah, it is probably a little better to focus on one at a time. And once you start getting used to, I think, the editing process, your approaches and how you write the next book will make the editing for that one a little smoother because you already kind of know what maybe not to do. So book two may actually come together a lot quicker for you.
Mm-hmm. And I
Who
think
knows?
book 2 will be a lot easier to edit
Yeah.
because in book 1, I was directionless. I mean, I wasn't completely directionless, but I was writing with my heart and I didn't really care about story structure or anything like that. And now I'm into Save the Cat and all that awesome stuff that I needed back then. But the point is, I think book 2 is going to be much easier to edit. I'm setting aside 3 months to edit, and this is my final edit before it goes to the editor. I'm setting aside 3 months because it needs a lot of work, book
Yeah.
1.
But with that now, with this kind of idea, um, the first one, you like you said, you were writing from the heart, so you were more of a, as the fun terms are, a pantser, just kind of going with the flow.
at that
Going
time. Yeah.
forward, because you already mentioned outlining, so are you going? How much planning are you going to be putting into your subsequent books? Are you going to be trying to pretty much know everything, or are you going to like how much do you want to outline pre-writing? If that
Um, my outlines are not chapter by chapter. They
okay.
are um, a grouping of paragraphs that lay out for me what needs to happen at key points in the book. And then the in between, I pants because a lot of times there's something in here that has a good idea, but this won't listen to it. If there's an outline, this will stick to the outline. And this is in charge. So it helps me to have flexibility. I need flexibility.
Oh, I do too. I kind of like, well, what your approach is going to be is kind of like I do that. I know the high points. I know the main plot. I know the main characters. I know how it ends. I know where I want to go. But even in between, I'll let things kind of ebb and flow
Hmm.
because sometimes that's nice, and it allows, without being too constrictive, it just helps me, come up. My brain's always working on all these other questions, so comes up with different backstories or plot lines or things like or
Hmm.
new characters that maybe I had not originally intended when I put out my outline. So I do like that. I think
Hmm.
that's a nice approach. At least for me, that's how I work too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that makes me think about what I'm working on right now. Um, so in book one, I introduced something called the Book of El. It's kind of like their Bible, it's their religious text. And so I realized I wrote the entire book referencing this little book of El, and I don't know what's in it. So now I'm writing the book of El because I need to know what's in the book of El so I can have because that's going to shape and guide what my main character does. She's following that guidance, but if I don't know what's in the book, that's going to create some problems. So, yes, that's what I'm doing right now.
Here's a fun thing to throw at you. If you do create this Book of L, that would be a fun bonus material to do either in a special edition or a newsletter. For one of those perks that if you're signed up for a newsletter, you get the Book of L,
Uh-huh.
additive or something like that. So that's kind of cool. Just play around with that idea. That's like,
Yeah.
good marketing, good bonus material for
Yeah.
people
Well,
to
and you said that you're running a Kickstarter or you're going to run a Kickstarter soon, right?
going through. Yes,
I'm
my
gonna
first.
I'm gonna follow your campaign because I want to run a Kickstarter eventually, and I'm very lost, so I need to learn.
Well, I'll be happy to let you know how it goes for me. One of my other book talk friends, his Kickstarter, because he's done, I think this is his sixth one, so he's done a number of them, and his launched Sunday. I'm trying to remember when it launched. It launched only a couple days ago, and it's double the funding. He's like reached his goals and double over, and fantastic. So if you check out AP Beswick here,
Mm.
his link tree takes you to his Kickstarter, and you can see his, and it's inspiring and intimidating, very intimidating. I don't know. I think he's probably in bed by now because he's in the UK. But
Mm.
if you watch this, um, you're intimidating, good way. But yeah, AP Beswick, he's doing good, and he's another fantasy writer, though he focuses on adults because his are very dark
Mm.
retellings of British literature and folklore.
Oh, okay.
So, but
Yeah, there's
there
some
you
dark
go.
stuff in there.
Yeah, so it's always fun and just trying to see. And I think that's the nice thing about being an indie author. You have the flexibility to try things that are outside of the box. Because I would never have thought about doing that until I started talking to Adam, and then he was like, watching his success, and I was just like, well, maybe I should try. It's a lot of work to put in, at least up front,
Yeah,
but crossing fingers.
yeah.
Crossing fingers.
Well, and I always underestimate how much people love the extras. So, art or
Mm-hmm.
geeky stuff, like maybe a recipe from your
Mm-hmm.
book or, a tea from your book. People like that, and it's not expensive, really. I mean, not if you're figuring on your Kickstarter being successful. It shouldn't be
Yeah.
expensive to make that. And then you have these readers who aren't just readers of your book, but they have all these little things that remind them of your book and that they like to show off to people. It
Hmm.
just kind of increases their emotional investment in you and in your book. So it's
Yeah,
really a great deal for everybody.
I think so, and it's been fun trying to find artists and figure out, those fun perks for people and the logistics
Yeah.
behind it. Might be a little bit of a nightmare, but just trying to figure all that out is kind of neat, and seeing, like what you said, what people would be interested in and going forward. But with that said, I see that there is like sketch art behind you. Are those character art for your
Yeah.
stuff, or is it just inspirational pieces? I can't. They're
Yes.
kind of teeny on
So
my screen.
this one, well, actually, most of them are drawn by my sister. She's an
Oh,
amazing artist, and she's very
lovely.
invested in my books, which bless her heart, um, because she loved them when they were not great. But yes, so she did that, and then these are just some little art breeder things I
Mm-hmm.
made, just for my own edification to give me an image to work with. And
Yeah.
I found out it's very helpful to have that later when you are purchasing art, because if you have something you can share with your artist that gives them, like, you don't want them to copy it, but it gives them
Mm-hmm.
a concept to draw from. It's so much better than paragraph after paragraph after paragraph after paragraph
Yep.
trying to explain your character's facial expression alone. I just recently ordered my first piece of artwork for To Bind Fire, and I found someone on Etsy who does hand paintings. Actually, I think they finish them digitally, but it's a hand painting, and um, which I like more realistic art. I'm not as into anime and stuff like that. So I'm really excited. I hope it'll appeal to my audience as much as it's going to appeal to me. I'm gonna love it for sure. 'Cause
I
hand
know.
painted, I mean, wow.
That's really neat. I like a variety of different styles, and so for me, it just depends on the vibe of the book or series. And so definitely, if once I start getting into character art for maybe more my adult level fantasy, I would probably lean more toward the more realistic styles versus some of my young adult, because it's so just a fun fantasy. I don't mind it being a little more, not really. I wouldn't say necessarily cartoonish, but just colorful, creative, artistic.
Hmm.
I can't think of the right terms because they're all art, but yes, less realistic.
Hmm. I'm
But
looking at the YA covers behind you. Did you use silhouettes? It looks like
yeah,
you used silhouettes. That's
yeah, I tried to
awesome.
focus on silhouettes for the main character. And the idea was because I didn't really want to show her face, at least not initially. I'm trying to debate if I will go that route, because it just happens that each book there's a little more of the next face that you get to see, and that just happened when we were working with my designer for those book covers. But I have to decide how much of the face I want, because I like the idea of a silhouette where you didn't see exactly details. I mean, you have descriptions in the book, but
Hmm.
I didn't want to have just a full figure on there, because I've done that before with one of my series where I have a figure, and then once people see that, that's what they have already imprinted in the mind, that that's your
Hmm.
character.
Yeah.
And trying to give a little more
Hmm.
creativity for people's imaginations, even though I have descriptions in the book, if that makes sense.
I love silhouettes on book covers that have images within the silhouette, because I feel like instead of
Hmm.
seeing the outside of the person, you're seeing what their internal struggle is, or what's in their heart. And I like
Hmm.
that imagery, because I like to build my character, like if I'm reading someone else's book, I like to build what they look like in my own mind. And if there's a very clear, like for instance, some of Sarah J. Maas's books have a very clear character image on the front, and it kind of spoiled it for me a little bit, because it's not what I wanted to imagine, but my brain was stuck on that because I saw it.
Yeah, I gotcha. And that's why, well, kind of going back to, I know they're middle grade, but Harry Potter, the first Harry
Hmm.
Potter covers were very, not animated, but not cartoonish. What am I trying to think of? But they weren't realistic, and so even though you
Yeah.
had figures on there, your mind, when you started creating like what he would look, in reality, could still take a hold. You can still have the
Hmm.
creativity of your characters. And then the movies came out, and then all of a sudden, I can't not see those characters.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually read the Harry Potter series for the first time this year, or this past year. And I read the books and then I watched the movies, and that's definitely the way to do it.
Mhm. That's
Yep.
at least the ideal way. And I really do try with any kind of book to movie or book to series, read the books first. There have been times where I started something and then realized after the fact it was a book, and I'm like, oops. But I usually try the other way around, where if there's a book out, I'll make sure I try to, because the author, that was their world, and
Hmm.
there are very, 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 very probably few movies and series that really capture everything
Hmm.
to the point of doing it justice that's,
Yeah.
compiled in a book. So you do lose a little bit of that.
Hmm. Yep.
So let me ask you, okay, so going back to your series, how many main characters do you consider you have? Since you
Okay,
said
I
you're
I have two main
okay,
characters, and the other characters revolve around those two characters. And
okay,
so
and
and so one point of view is actually very far removed from my main character. They're having two different experiences that will tie in, and you only see hints of them tying in the first book, but in the second book they collide.
that's fantastic. So going forward, are there still going to be the same two main characters throughout, or are you going to add or change up your characters book by book?
In the second book, it'll be the same two main characters, and a new collection of side characters. And then
Okay.
in the third book, um, I know that eventually I definitely need to get more into the head of a certain character. His name is Jason, but it's spelled with a C, Jason. So it's epic, technically.
Obviously.
Um, I know I need to get into his head.
Okay.
Um, and you're just making me think about it now. That's why I've got this pensive look on my face because I'm like, yeah, that's a thing I need to think about. Like, I'm
And then
ignoring him
everybody
too
go
much.
on
I need to
pause,
stop
take
doing
a
that.
5 minute writing sprint.
It's these conversations are amazing. I love these because it spurs my brain on in the direction I need to go. It's kind of like a wake up call. Like I'm sleeping through it and then I'm like, oh, I'm talking about it now and I'm watching a
Mhm.
person's reaction to my words and that's helping me form my story. Like, oh wait, but if I did this, then she'll go, wah.
I love that. I love that. Fantastic. But but yeah, so that's kind of cool. I always wonder like how when book series progress, especially different kind of fantasy and different subgenres, sometimes change up main characters even within the series. Obviously I don't, but others do, and so it's always, just curious
Hmm.
how people approach that. But in your world, so you mentioned in your mini pitch that there are obviously mythical creatures in and around the world. So we're not dealing with Earth, I'm assuming.
Hmm. Nope, not Earth.
Can we know the kingdom or realm or world that you're developing in this series?
Hmm. Yeah. So the continent is called Jandria, and bit of trivia for you. I'm developing my world way back when I started writing this, and I'm like, okay, I just need a quick filler name. My husband's name is John. We'll call it Jandria for now. And I'm sorry, but it's stuck. It's stuck like glue, and
I love it.
I'm gonna keep it.
Actually, on that idea of naming things, so for your characters, as you were saying, Jason with the C.
Yeah.
So how do you come up with your character names? Because people come up, I've literally heard someone say I Scrabble it, and I was like, okay, well,
Yeah.
so that does exist. But I've heard pretty much everything under the sun, or so I think. So how do you come up with your character names, especially for fantasy?
So it's not an exact science. Mostly, I just say names out loud to myself till something sounds right. And the only name that I have changed in the series since starting this method has been my main character. Her name was Fiona at first, and that just did not work. So now her name is Iris.
Oh, I like Iris. Iris.
I think
Very
it's a
pretty.
fairly popular character name. I see it, well, or maybe I'm just noticing it more in books now because my main character is Iris, and I'm like, oh no, this other person used it.
Yeah, only Iris. Well, I don't think I've read an Iris in a modern fantasy. My familiarity with mythology, Iris is a goddess. So in Greco-Roman, I think it's Greco-Roman myth, Iris is a goddess, and so that's the only name where I know of a character called Iris to this date
Hmm.
until now. But it's a very pretty name.
Thank you.
Yeah, when I come up with character names, it all depends on the series. I think for my first main character, Ueva, I kind of was like you. I was kind of sounding things out. I wanted it to be very unique. I didn't want it, to relate to anything. I wanted it to be novel. And so I was playing around with that one. And then from a few other characters on, I started wanting meanings behind the names. And so going
Hmm.
forward, almost all my characters have some reason why I named them the way I named them. Either they're named after some mythological entity or an obscure word but there's a reason for the madness. But in the beginning, it was just kind of, does it feel right?
Hmm.
Is this a name? Can I make it
Hmm.
a name?
Yeah, and my the character that is close to Iris Law at the time, his name is Tabin, and I was very happy with that name, and I thought it fit pretty well. And then I remembered Tamlin from, some of Sarah J. Maas books, and he has a similar character arc to my Tabin, and I was like, oh no, people are going to think I stole it or something, but I don't want to change the name because it's so perfect and it's just exactly what I want.
It's hard because as the number of writers increase, and there's going to be those thematic story arcs or character arcs that pop up, and there are going to be times where something is happenstantially very similar. You just there is that also that safety, as long as it's not true copyright. You don't want to ever take from someone
Oh
else.
no,
And,
no,
but
it's not. It's he
but
just has a
but
similar
there
arc.
are going to
That's
be
all.
similarities that recur. And I mean, let's think about it. Tropes. There are certain tropes people want in certain style books, and so
Hmm.
enemies to lovers is very popular with a lot of people, and so you'll see reiterations of that all the time.
Hmm.
But people still want more of it because there are definitely people who just are in love with that particular trope. I see a couple comments popping up and says nice to have meanings and names, so it can be easier, remember easier. Yeah, I do like that. And especially when, again, going back to fantasy names, some names are so obscure, it is kind of hard to remember them. So it's nice to have some kind of relatability. I can definitely see that. I'm bad with names in general. Outside of my own characters, it takes me forever to remember someone's name. I don't know. My brain doesn't work that way. Names are hard.
Names are hard.
But yeah, so okay, so going to your world or realm, or have you expanded to a true
World.
world?
It is a world, and we're focused on one continent for now, but that will change.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic. So,
Actually, technically, we get to see the entire universe. Like, it's not sci-fi, but there is
oh,
a universe.
hey, my young adult is a magical multiverse, so I do deal with 12 distinct planets and multiple dimensions on those planets, but it is a full fantasy. You can't escape from that because you're going to see every mythological thing under the sun in it. So it's a
Mhm.
fantasy. They're just, if you want to call it sci-fi undertones, sure. You're not going to see a spaceship, but you're dealing with planet jumping. Yes.
Well, as I mentioned,
Magic.
I was a hardcore Trekkie when I was a teenager, so actually, I think I'm gonna have to grab your books because they sound pretty epic.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And when yours comes out, you have to let me know because in October,
Hmm.
October, yeah,
Hmm.
exciting. I will keep my eyes and ears open. But have you considered if you're going to put in a map? People always ask that, especially with
Hmm.
fantasy books. Or is there going to be a map? I did that for my first series because I was dealing with essentially a kingdom and some surrounding areas. But I haven't done it with my others because I do deal with other multiple worlds or realms and too much distinction where I'm like, that's too complicated. I have not gone back to do another map since, though I'm starting to play around with ideas. Maybe I should do a small map for this area or that area, and not, have a couple little ones. I don't know. But have you
Hmm.
considered doing something like that? I know you're
Yeah.
still a few months out, but this is
I,
the
I
time
will
to get
have
started.
I will definitely have a map at least of the continent, Jandria. Um, I probably won't have a map of the entire world in the first book. I may have that eventually. I know I'm going to need to have some islands and some various things like that because in book 4 we see mermaids and the ocean come into play as we lead up to the final epic battle where the evil overlord is defeated in book 5. So basically, you're going to see. So it's an elemental series. So various people groups have power over various elements.
I
And
love it.
so you're going to see in each book a different one drawn out. And obviously, book 1 focuses on fire. But
I love
each book, you're going to see
my
something
element
different
of
pulled
choice.
out.
That's
Fire
fantastic.
is amazing.
Says the people who probably shouldn't be playing with fire. I know, but I still like it. Maybe it's just my love for all things that are hot and warm. I can't do the cold. I
No.
am ready for it to warm up. And I am living in the South. You can't really get much
Oh,
warmer
really?
anywhere. Yeah.
I'm living in North Dakota, so
Nope. See,
yeah.
it's beautiful. I've been up to South Dakota. Beautiful. I haven't been up to North Dakota, but South Dakota, that's a beautiful area. I could not do the cold. Kudos to you.
Well, thank you. We don't have as many snakes and spiders
That's
because
true.
they can't survive the cold. So
That's
there's
true.
that.
I have had a lot of people from the north will come down and be like, "What's that sound?" And I'm like, "It's a cicada." Someone's like, "What's a cicada?" I'm like, "It's a giant insect." And they're like, "What?"
Hmm. The furthest south I've ever been is Missouri. So, and I heard
Yeah,
the
no,
cicadas there. They're very loud.
that's funny. That is really funny. Okay, but yeah, so no, that's cool. So here's a thing I wanted to ask because I've noticed, and you're still relatively a young writer in the
Hmm.
sense of how many things you've written. I've noticed that I have to be very careful when I write worlds, especially different continents or realms, to be aware of different um lost my train of thought. Ecosystem. There you go. Ecosystem.
Uh, hmm.
Because weather patterns, because I'm so used to being in the South, I'll use terms I'm like, wait, nope, they wouldn't have that. That's a little too north or that's cold. And I have to like
Mm.
start doing the research of what would a climate kind of what I'm going for be like and what would I not have that I'm used to and I just assume.
Hmm.
So a lot of my main characters, with the exception of my Viking main character, but the other two, I should say, are Southern because they're from warmer climates towards the
Hmm.
southern part of their continent. So it just happened because that's what I'm used to. So here's a question: your main character, is she from south, north, east, west, center of your world? Like, did you ever think about that?
I actually have thought about that. She is from, so my continent is actually fairly far um, north of geography. The equator is, I believe, what you would say. So, um, similar placement probably to Canada, actually. So further north even than I'm living. And she is from very far north on the continent, and she's from the mountains even. So she's from a very cold area. And I would spoil some of the story if I told why she's there.
You don't
She's
have to.
not there by choice. She did not choose the cold and the misery, but she's that of course, and that's part of her journey. So
That's kind of cool. And I see a comment popped up a little bit ago referring to, I guess, when we were talking about maps. It said throw rice on a mat and trace gives you great continents and islands. That's kind of cool. I like that. Now I need to play with some rice. No, I love
I've seen some videos of people doing that. It's really cool.
I've never. I have to go
It's a
Google
cool
this.
way to do it.
I'll have to try this. I'll have to Google this because that is neat. My one of my backgrounds is art. Not I don't do cover art. That's not my style. I do animal portraiture, pet portraiture, but I for my first map I did draw it, and I had to like kind of try to teach myself how to draw a map and made some mistakes because I was doing it to look cool and wanted certain things places and didn't think about geography as well as I thought. So if anybody actually analyzes that map, they'll be like, that doesn't make sense. Look at a couple things, and I'll be like, I'm sorry, it was my first time. You gotta give it give it to me when I was developing.
Hmm.
I've learned since then, but everybody makes mistakes. That's one of mine. I will fully admit. Calling myself out.
I'm sure I'll have a very hard time with it. Geography was not a good subject for me in school. So,
Yeah, it takes a little time, but you can play around with it, and I think there are a number of I don't know if any of them are paid versus free, but there are a number of resources out there where authors can manipulate and create, you know, a
hmm,
map if they're doing it themselves, or you can just pay someone.
yeah,
There's that too.
they deserve to be supported, these wonderful artists. They really do.
Absolutely, 100% agree. So let me ask, since we're actually getting close to the end of the hours, because that hours go fast when you talk. But let me ask before I forget, because I always want to make sure I cover the basics. For anybody who's interested in your upcoming book and you as a writer, what platforms are you on? Do you have a website at the moment? What is it? So let's get some of the basics down.
Okay. I don't have a website yet. That is coming soon. The
Woo.
best way to follow me right now is TikTok or Instagram. I'm the most active on TikTok right now. I'll be spreading out to YouTube eventually, most likely, and a few others, and I'll be developing a mailing list soon as well. That's all to come. So if you want to be informed on those developments, follow me right here on TikTok. That's the best way, and I'll let you know. I'll be very loud about it.
Yay! Yeah, I'm very bad about being loud in a timely manner for stuff. I'm kind of like, oh yeah, I forgot. I have a release in a week. I should have been talking about. It's just the way my brain works. Is like once things are out, I'm talking about what's already out. But I'm very bad about like, oh by the way, did you know you can do this? But no, that's really cool. So yeah, follow you, and I will definitely put because I'll be repurposing this on my YouTube channel in a couple weeks or next week. I don't remember what my schedule is, but I'll put your links live below so people can click and follow. And again, when you do get someone your website and all that, you can always let me know and I'll update that too. So people
Okay,
can follow you that way too.
thank
Anywho,
you.
one other thing I always like to ask before I forget is there anything that we have not covered so far that you would love to talk about that you want to make sure people know about you and your work?
Um, the only other thing to know about me is that I am a Christian and my works are not in your face, like you need to be a Christian with me, but they are going to reflect my beliefs. So you will see, oh, that kind of reminds me of the Book of El, kind of reminds me a little bit of the way the Bible is structured, things like that. So I am a Christian, and I did not set out to write a book that had anything to do with my faith, and I was amazed that those elements did, like, they were right there, and I wrote them and I didn't even realize it. So again, book one is absolutely just my heart vomiting out onto the page. That's what you're going to find.
Well, I mean, fantasy is a reflection of, or fiction in general is a reflection of the author. And there are, some of the most famous authors of their day were, you have C.S. Lewis, who has some very
Yeah.
obvious metaphors. And then you have like Tolkien, who is very religious in his own right. And he wrote epic fantasy. And it was just really cool that way, too. So, I
Yeah,
don't
you
think
just
that's a.
named two of my biggest inspirations. So,
Oh, there
yeah.
you go. Way
Yeah,
to go to the
especially Tolkien.
Inklings. When I was in England, I had a trip in England at one point, and I had to go to the pub where both C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and their whole group of friends would meet and just talk about war fantasy. And so I was like, do they sit in that
Ah!
booth or do they sit in that booth? Which one? Because I need to like absorb your knowledge,
Oh
absorb
my
your mind.
goodness. Oh my goodness. I would die to do that. That's amazing.
See, a bucket list. And as an author, I wonder if you can be like, this is for research, this is inspiration. This is a work trip.
Someday
They
maybe
would
I'll be wealthy enough to do such things. I don't
you
think a
never know.
Kickstarter would quite cover it.
Okay, well, you never know. You could swing it. Kickstarter, please fund me to do this epic travel so I pull more inspiration to write wonderful works. Who knows? Who knows? But
There's always a
yeah,
way to swing that.
you never know. That would be fantastic. But okay, so as a young writer, what are your dream goals in your writing career? Obviously, there's always publish your book. Fantastic.
Yep.
Find readers,
Yep.
of course. But
Yep.
beyond that, what are some of your, goals that you would like to see in the next few years? To whenever.
Well, as far as hard goals, just getting my 5 books out there. But as far as just emotional fulfillment goals, I was thinking about this the other night actually, as I was considering pen name options and asking myself, why is it so important to me that it be my real name on my cover? Why can't it just be something cool and to market? And it's just bothering me. And I realized I will not feel in here that I am a real writer until somebody else who has no emotional connection to me and no reason to compliment me or love me or anything says, this was a good book. I liked this book.
Well, yeah.
And so that, if I achieve that, and then I can say, I'm a writer, this is what I do. And that is my emotional goal.
That is fantastic. I love that. Now, please note that when you start putting out your work and start getting those reviews and commentaries, it's going to be hard, but when you get that first negative one, but don't let it ruin
Yeah,
your world. So
I
I know
know.
everybody says that, but it is true. It is true. It's
I
still going to sting, but,
I
but,
know. I know. I am
but
scared, but I'm still gonna do it.
the goal is to have more people like your work, a lot more, and I'm sure they will. So, and that'll be fantastic. It's all, that first good review, they just like, fantastic.
Oh.
And you'll know soon enough. It's exciting. It really is. So let me ask, how did you, because you've mentioned formatter, you mentioned editor.
Mhm.
How did you find those people? Like, where did you search? There was someone you actually knew, or
So I reached out to several different editors. Well, I'll back up just a little further. I hired a developmental editor initially this past fall, not really knowing what I was doing. Just picked one out of the blue that I thought maybe would like my book. Um, and it was a disaster. It was not good. And I learned my lesson and I realized I need to search hard and be thorough before I choose anybody ever again. So I found quite a few people through social media, through recommendations from friends, and I asked for samples from all of them, the same sample, so I could hold it up, each one next to each other and say, what did I like or dislike about each one. And there was one that stood out above all the others. She's actually from Australia, which is amazing. But she can, edit for the US, which, it's actually interesting how there is a difference,
Mhm,
we speak the same language, but there's a difference
mhm.
in the way that we write and that we speak. And anyway, it's really cool. I love culture and everything, but so she stood out like a lot above the rest, and I'm really excited, really really excited. She's like, find that find that editor who doesn't just fix mistakes, but can feel your vision and take it to that next level. And she does that. And
That. Lovely. I
It's
love that.
amazing. And it feels so good to know too that if I make a mistake, she's going to catch it and she's gonna
Hmm.
either
Hmm.
fix it, or if it's a different kind of mistake, she's gonna be like, hey, did you see this?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
anyway, I'm on cloud nine about my editor. I'm so
That's
excited.
so neat. And we have a comment that popped up. It said, I got me my first negative review about my training out of 100 positive reviews. It happens. I mean, there's
Mm,
always going to be someone who's not going to like it because it's the wrong genre for them. They
mm-hmm.
didn't. They wanted one thing and your book was another. They are just in a bad mood, a bad time. There's always going to be something that they're outside things, and not everybody's going to like every book. But not every book's for everybody. You have to understand that too. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that people will catch an honest mistake and be like, "Hey, there was an error spelling." I'll be, "Thank you." That's going to be quickly corrected. Because no matter
Mm-hmm.
also how many times an editor or beta readers or alpha readers or anybody looks at your stuff, there will be that spelling error. There's always at least one, maybe five. But there always at least one. But yeah, no, it's interesting what you were saying about hiring an editor from Australia, and I'm curious about that because I know my editor my editors both have been from the US. And one of them, who I've worked with for years, she was just on me because she was just like, you can't stop writing this word this way. Stop writing this word. Don't use this word. And she was like, that is British English, not American English. British English, not American
Oh.
English. She kept calling me out, and I was like, what? What am I doing? Like what? And like she's like, gray is not spelled like that. That is British English, not American English.
Oh.
And I was just like, scratching my head, like, why do I keep making these mistakes? I had to step back, look at my bookshelves, and most of the literature that I've read that wasn't ancient epics was British lit. And I was like, oh, I literally just write that way or speak that way because I'm so used to reading it and because I have started branching out in audiobooks. So my Viking series, that narrator, George is from the UK, and so it's interesting because the way he pronounces certain words are different than I do because it's both English, but different kind of English. And so sometimes, for the most part, I let him, say it however he's comfortable with. But I had to catch him one time because the way he pronounced one word, which was correct for the UK, was a way we pronounce a totally different word in the US.
Ah.
And I was like, I'm sorry, but the people from the US listening to this audiobook are going to think something totally different. We have to change the way you pronounce that one. But again, it's just interesting. Same
Mm-hmm.
language predominantly, but there are subtle differences.
Yeah. Yeah. I just love all of that stuff. I love the differences that just make us unique. I love that.
Yeah. No, definitely. Definitely. I see my mom was also joined the chat. Hello, mom.
Aw.
Always, it's nice to have family that supports you, like you were saying about your sister just loving your work. Okay, can I ask before I know we're hitting that end of the hour, but can I ask, do you know, or am I allowed to know at this point, who you're going to dedicate your first book to, or are you going to dedicate it to anybody? Because, my first early works, I dedicate a lot to my family because they were some of the biggest supporters of my work. So I definitely had them
Hmm.
in the dedications. So I was just curious, since it's your
Yeah.
first book, have you thought about it?
Yeah. I have actually. I've already written the dedication.
Oh,
And my husband does not get on TikTok, so it won't spoil it for him. I was going to keep it a surprise until he was holding the printed version in his hand. But this won't spoil it for him. So I'm going to dedicate it to my husband, because without his support, this book would not exist. I mean, he is a man among men.
love it.
He allows me to bloom in ways I never could have without him.
Ah, that sounds like the
So
dedication right there.
it is part of it. Yes.
Ah, you'll make me tear up before I read this. Oh,
Oh,
so emotional. I love it.
I can't, I could go on another hour about the things that he does, the things he forgives me for. Like, he's just, oh my goodness. He's everything.
Now, okay, I really want to ask, but have you or any of the characters in your book? Because this is one of those base questions. Inspired by anybody you know? Everybody always asks me that, and I'm like, honestly, up until recently, no, they weren't. Not
Hmm.
my earlier works. They were not. They were not inspired in the least. And all my friends were like, "Is this one me? Is this one me?" I was like, "I promise you, that's not the case." That has changed because I wrote myself into one of my books because I can, because that is the fantastic thing about fantasy. But it's a story for another day. But I mean, honestly, it's just curious. Were you incorporating any of your anybody you know in some way, shape, or form in your book?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely, absolutely. My main character is my sister.
No.
She's an introvert, so I'm an extrovert for the most part. I mean, whatever. But so it was a challenge for me, and it continues to be a challenge with her character. But I'm loving the challenge. I'm loving learning my sister and learning to understand her better. And the two male main characters are both my husband, two aspects of his personality. And I didn't even
Fantastic.
realize it until I was done writing it. And I was thinking, where did I get all of this? And then I realized two aspects of my husband's personality, dark and handsome, but also goofy and fun. And it's
I love
just
it.
funny.
I
So,
love it.
yeah,
Shades of
yep.
people you love.
And
That's
then
the cool.
another male main character is my brother, dark and brooding and kind of grouchy.
I hope
Love
you
you,
enjoy that,
Jonathan.
brother.
He's not on TikTok for sure. Grouchy, brooding.
Fantastic. I love that. I'm excited. Well, thank you for coming out and chatting with me today. And like I said, I will be repurposing this on to YouTube in a week or so. I'll let you know, and I'll share it across the ether so other people can come listen and meet a future published author. It's coming up. This is your year. That's exciting. But again, so happy to finally got to talk and meet. And if you ever want to do this again down the line, just let me know. I do these weekly.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely want to do it again.
Perfect.
This has been a lot of
Well,
fun.
yes. And I hope you have a lovely night, and I will talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.